$17.49 for one can of coffee in America. This used to be $11.99 a month and a half ago. Yeah.
Did you know you're being taxed? Just for wanting a simple hamburger. That's right. Everyday American staples, ground beef, bottled water, coffee, cooking oil, are quietly turning into luxury goods. Not because they're running out, but because of tariffs and tricks from big retail chains. Ever since the Trump administration kicked off a wave of 35 to 76% tariffs on imported food, stores like Walmart, Kroger, and even Target haven't absorbed those costs. Instead, they've pushed them onto you, the consumer, through higher prices, fewer discounts, and temporary labels. But this isn't temporary. This video will break down 5 foods you shouldn't buy right now, because their prices have shot way past their actual value. More importantly, I'll show you smarter alternatives that help you save money without sacrificing quality of life. Don't let your grocery cart become collateral damage in a trade war. Stay sharp, stay informed, be a smart prepper. Ground beef. By mid-July 2025, ground beef prices at major supermarket chains like Walmart had hit $6.10 per pound, the highest in over a decade, for millions of Americans living on fixed pensions or middle-class incomes. This isn't just a number. It's a clear signal that a key part of the everyday meal is slipping out of reach. According to data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the nation's cattle herd has dropped to around 87 million head, the lowest since 1951, due to the lingering effects of drought, rising feed costs, and financial pressure forcing many ranchers to sell off livestock before they're market ready. But it's not just supply that's driving up prices. Since Q1 of 2025, the Trump administration has imposed a 76% tariff on beef imports from Brazil, citing violations of quarantine standards, along with a 35% tariff on Canadian beef, 2 sources that had previously played a key role in stabilizing domestic prices. In response, retail giants like Walmart have been forced to shift entirely to domestic suppliers, who themselves are strained by rising costs for transportation, labor, and fuel. In a recent public statement, Walmart admitted it could no longer absorb the cost increases as it once did, and had to adjust shelf prices accordingly. That's why consumers in beef-loving states like Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas are seeing prices rise week after week, with no end in sight. The result, many families are changing how they eat, switching to alternatives like sausage, frozen meat, or cheaper processed products. Despite the significant differences in nutritional value, a study by the Urban Institute warns that if meat prices climb another 20% in the second half of the year, an estimated 4 million more seniors could lose access to fresh meat, especially those who rely on food assistance programs. Fast food chains have started cutting portion sizes or raising menu prices too, turning the humble hamburger, once a symbol of the affordable American meal, into something many working people can no longer justify. As ground beef, a staple in American kitchens, becomes harder to afford. The impact isn't just financial, it carries long-term consequences for public health, nutrition, and economic inequality. With no relief in sight and tariffs still firmly in place, consumers should think twice before tossing that pack of ground beef into their cart. It hasn't disappeared. But at today's prices, it's no longer a smart buy for most Americans. Cutting back, switching to alternative protein sources, or turning to frozen foods might be the temporary fix, at least until the supply chain resets, or federal trade policy takes a major turn. Bottled water. A gallon of purified bottled water used to cost less than $1 at Walmart, but in just under 6 months, that price has crept up to $1.79, and in some rural or mountain states, it's pushing close to $2.50. To some, it's just a few extra cents per jug, but for people relying on social assistance, those with tight budgets, or families buying in bulk for multiple generations, that bump is a burden they can't ignore. What frustrates consumers most is the lack of warning. No shortages, no natural disasters, no public explanation. Yet the price still went up. And when you dig deeper, the real reason lies where few people are looking: tariffs and rising logistics costs. In the US, bottled water, especially store brands like Great Value or Kirkland, depends heavily on automated packaging lines in northern states and mineral water sources. many of which come from Canada. When the federal government slapped a 35% tariff on Canadian imports earlier this year, bottling plants had to renegotiate shipping contracts, switch water sources, or pay extra for quality testing. All of those costs were quickly passed on to consumers. But what angers people even more is how retailers quietly manipulate perception instead of openly raising prices. Many chains kept the shelf price the same but shrunk the jug size from 1 gallon to 0.92 or even 0.85 gallons. Or they eliminated bulk discounts altogether. Shoppers didn't notice and only realized something had changed when their receipts got longer, but their carts got lighter in regions like Arizona, Nevada, or West Texas, where summer temperatures top 100-degree and bottled water is essential. This hits hard. Seniors living alone and outdoor workers have no choice but to buy bottled water, as local tap water is often unsafe or metallic in taste. Now they're forced to choose between buying less or rationing what they drink. Federal agencies have issued no guidance. Retailers dodge responsibility, blaming it all on market fluctuations. And so, the burden falls on everyday Americans. Many feel betrayed by the very system that once prided itself on affordable goods, now quietly squeezing their wallets one bottle at a time. Water is the most basic human need when it becomes a financial strain. It's more than just an inconvenience. It's a sign that we're living in an economy where even something as fundamental as clean drinking water isn't safe from profit motives and political crossfire. People don't need more theories, they need transparency. And more than anything, they need protection from having to overpay just to take a sip. Ground coffee. Do you drink coffee every morning? Maybe it's a diluted cup of Folgers, or just plain black coffee from a Great Value can. For many people, it's not a luxury, it's a ritual, a quiet, steady way to start the day, clear-headed. But if you visited the coffee aisle at Walmart recently, you may have noticed something feels off. That 30.5-ounce can of Folgers that used to cost under $7, it's now $11. In some places, close to $13. The coffees that once served as a reliable go-to for working folks and retirees are now priced like premium imports. And the saddest part? It's not your fault. You didn't choose to pay more. The market forced your hand. We're paying extra because of a war none of us voted for, a tariff war. The federal government has slapped duties on coffee imports from Brazil, a country that supplies over 25% of America's coffee. Distributors, rather than taking the hit, have turned to Colombia, Ethiopia, Vietnam, farther, pricier, and less stable alternatives. Every shipping leg, customs delay, and tariff checkpoint adds a few cents, then a few dozen, to every pound of coffee you buy, and the retailers. They didn't wait. They slashed promotions, shortened loyalty programs, and quietly shrank package sizes. Ever notice paying the same for a smaller bag of coffee? You're not imagining things. It's really happening. But here's what stings: most coffee isn't some extravagant indulgence. It's tied to work, alertness, and daily rhythm. It helps a night shift worker stay awake, helps a retiree keep their routine, helps someone job hunting, or just living alone start their day with a small sense of control. And now, even that simple cup of coffee is becoming something we hesitate over. Have you started using a little less coffee per brew? Maybe going from 2 cups a day down to 1? If so, you're not alone. Millions of Americans are doing the same thing. I'm not saying you should give up coffee, but I do believe you can make smarter choices. Some private label brands, like Kroger brand, Sam's Choice, or even basic instant coffees, are still nearly 40% cheaper than name brand options. Or try switching to coarse ground coffee and using a filter instead of pods. It lasts longer, costs less, and you're not paying extra for fancy packaging. We don't need to give up our routines, but we can refuse to overpay for something as simple as a morning cup of coffee. And sometimes, just switching brands is enough to send a message, a quiet protest against a system that's squeezing too hard. Canned goods. Can you remember the last time you bought a pack of Campbell's canned soup for under $5, or grabbed a can of Goya black beans for just 99 cents? Maybe it was a few months ago, but now things are different. And it's not because you shopped at the wrong store, it's because the entire market has shifted, if you're someone who keeps canned food stocked in the pantry. For convenience, storm prep, or just to save time. You've probably felt it already. Prices are up, shelves are thin, and every grocery trip brings a new moment of frustration. Why is something so basic starting to feel luxurious? The answer doesn't lie in the food inside. It's the metal can on the outside. Most people don't notice, but nearly half of the thin tin plate used for canned goods in the US comes from Canada. When the government imposed a 35% tariff on this material, packing plants, already running on tight margins, were forced to halt production or hike prices immediately. A can of soup that used to be $1.29 can now run $1.79. A can of Spam in some areas, it's spiked past $4.50. And worse, some stores have started limiting how many cans customers can buy. Sounds extreme, but it's already happening in parts of Ohio and Pennsylvania. So let me ask you, do you still feel secure seeing a full shelf of canned goods at home? Or is each can starting to feel like a decision? More and more people are feeling that pressure, especially families with young kids, elderly people living alone, or anyone trying to stretch every meal for them. Canned food isn't a backup plan. It's a practical solution for busy days, low budgets, or unstable times. It's something they trust ready to eat. Shelf stable, no fridge required. But when prices jump, discounts disappear, and can sizes shrink quietly over time, that trust starts to crack. Now, I'm not saying you should give up canned goods, not at all. But if you're used to name brands like Campbell's, Goya, or Hormel, it might be time to consider store brands like Great Value, Market Pantry, or Signature Select. They often offer similar quality, but for 25–30% less. Some folks are even cooking stews and chili at home, portioning them out and freezing them. It saves money and you know exactly what's in your food. If you've got the time and a small freezer, it's a smart option worth exploring. The market is changing. Not in ways that favor consumers, but what you can control is how you respond. And sometimes, switching brands or preparing just a few backup meals is enough to defend your right to choose, at least in your own kitchen. Canola oil. If you've walked into a grocery store and saw a gallon of cooking oil priced at nearly $14, you probably asked yourself, am I seeing this right? No, you're not seeing things. That's canola oil. Once the cheap, clean, go-to staple in just about every American kitchen. Now selling at a price many people never imagined. Here's the reality: over 70% of the canola oil consumed in the US comes from Canada. From the seed, to cold pressing, to refining, to bottling. Nearly the entire process depends on a cross-border supply chain. When the US imposed a 35% tariff on all Canadian agricultural imports, that supply chain broke down, not just in price, but in speed and reliability. Domestic producers simply don't have the capacity to fill the gap overnight. The result: consumers are left with two options: pay more, or switch oils. But this isn't just about a few extra bucks for a bottle of oil. It's about how a basic household item, used in frying, sautéing, even homemade salad dressing, suddenly became out of reach for millions of working families. Imagine a single mom in Michigan, a retiree in Missouri, or a small diner owner in Arkansas, all having to rework their entire meal prep or business menu because cooking oil is no longer affordable. Even worse, while major brands raise prices, some grocery stores are quietly pushing in blended oils of questionable origin, labeled as vegetable oil blends, but offering no guarantee of purity or quality. And shoppers, they don't have many choices. If you're not paying close attention, you might end up with something that simply isn't worth the price. So, what should you do if you're looking for something healthy and easy to cook with? Consider switching to private label corn oil or sunflower oil. They're still more affordable than name brand canola, and if it's just for salad dressing, light blend olive oil can be a solid substitute. Most importantly, don't let old habits lock you into paying new prices. In a market this volatile, the smart consumer is the one who stays flexible, who knows when to stick with what's familiar, and when it's time to adapt. What used to be everyday essentials, ground beef, morning coffee, cooking oil, are now being repriced by forces far beyond the consumer's control. Tariffs, supply chain costs, And retail pricing strategies have quietly turned each meal into a complicated calculation in this reality. The only thing you can control is becoming a proactive shopper, knowing how to substitute, how to adapt, and when to say no to unreasonable prices.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.